In Catholic baptism, immediately in the ritual, right after we're baptized with water, we're anointed on the crown of the head with sacred chrism, with words that say that we may always remain members of Christ as priest, prophet, and king. Priest, prophet, and king. It's to say that we see that Jesus Christ is the fulfillment, the fullness of the priesthood, the high priesthood of all prophets, and also he is the King of Kings. And that we as baptized members share in his work as priest, prophet, and king. And so, of course, today, we especially reflect on this kingly dimension. What does it mean that Jesus is king, that Christ is king? What does it mean for us to participate in his work as king? First of all, as long as we're on baptism, to understand this, it's why do we need baptism at all? Why do we need Jesus at all? Of course, it goes all the way back to the original sin of Adam and Eve, that we live in a broken and fallen world, that to a degree, in some way, is under the dominion of the evil one, the enemy, Satan. Jesus often refers to him as the prince of this world, sort of acknowledging that somehow this fallen, broken world is under his dominion. And of course, if you need any evidence of that, just turn on the news. Unfortunately, there's plenty of work of evil in the world. But of course, he's not the rightful ruler of this world. He's a false king. A king who enslaves, who brings chaos, destruction, and death. And the true king is Jesus Christ. And he didn't leave us in this kingdom of darkness, chaos, but came in a way, if you will, behind enemy lines to come and rescue us as a true king, to transfer us, as we read in that second reading, from the kingdom of darkness into his kingdom of light. A kingdom not of chaos, destruction, slavery, and death, but a kingdom of freedom, of truth, of justice, of peace, of goodness, and of love, and of life. On the deepest level, this is what he came to rescue us from. And that's what we acknowledge, that we are now citizens of a kingdom not of this world. And yet we're still in this world. So St. Peter in his letters in the Bible talks about, what does it mean then? Yes, we're citizens of this world, and so there are legitimate government authorities over us, and as long as they don't contradict with our faith, we should be obedient to them. But yet we're also citizens not of this world, of this kingdom of light. So we're called to live differently, and somehow how we live is meant to transform society. We are pilgrims in this world, but we're not merely passive pilgrims. That we have this active call to share in the work of Christ to redeem this world, to transform this world, society, ever more fully, to be more in harmony with the kingdom of Christ. And so if Jesus is king, if Jesus is our king, then that means that everything in our life is affected, is ordered by him, by his values, his teachings, by who he is. Everything from how I live and move in this world as a member of society, as I relate to my coworkers, my family members, my friends, how I spend my time, my money, my energy. That it's all transformed. It means it's all affected by Jesus being my Lord and King. Every aspect of who I am is changed by this reality. If Christ is truly my King. And then, as I said, then it also means that our faith isn't just meant to be lived within these four walls. It's easy for us, especially in our world today, there's often this messaging that our faith is meant to just be our own private affair and don't bother anyone else with it. Just my private thing I do on Sundays, but it doesn't have anything to do with out there. Or more so, we sometimes get this message of, well, because we believe in the separation of church and state, that our faith should have nothing to do with how we order society out there. But that, my friends, is not the gospel of Jesus Christ. Jesus came not only to transform us as individuals, but also to transform the whole world. That Christians are meant to be, as he says, light of the world and salt of the earth. To be like leaven, yeast in society, where a little bit affects the whole batch of dough. That how we live is meant to transform the world. And lest we think that's merely an antiquated idea, even the founding fathers of this nation, who conceived of the idea or articulated this idea of separation of church and state, very much had a sense that religion would influence society. You see, they had this idea, the founding fathers, when they wrote the Constitution and conceived of this idea of a government by the people for the people. It was precisely with the understanding that the people would have to be people of virtue and moral character. And so the assumption was that there would be something, and in their mind that something was religion, particularly Christianity, that would shape the people, that would give them moral fiber, that would cultivate moral character and teach virtue. And lest you think this is just Father Kevin making this up, there's a quote here from John Adams, the second President of the United States, who wrote about this very idea. That the assumption is that religion would influence the people. He says, "We have no government armed with power capable of contending with human passions, unbridled by morality and religion. Rather, avarice, ambition, revenge, or gallantry would break the strongest cords of our Constitution as a whale goes through a net. Our Constitution is designed only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate for any other." So even our founding fathers had an idea that this government by the people for the people is only one that is transformed into moral character and virtue, one influenced by Christ. So we have to push back against the idea that my faith is merely a private thing. No, we have to proclaim to the world that Christ is King. But also then how we live and move in society, how we order society to bring it more in harmony with the kingdom of heaven. So, how do we do that? Well, of course, we don't have to just blindly figure it out. The church gives us guidance, and the church has articulated principles that we should keep in mind as we strive to order society, to guide us in her Catholic social teaching. That those guiding principles, of course, that we're to work for peace and justice, they also include the dignity of every human person. That every human being from conception until natural death and everything in between has a sacred and inviolable human dignity, regardless of wealth, class, ethnicity, etc. And that needs to be protected and respected. That also there's this idea of, in Catholic social teaching, of the common good, which is not just the majority good, what's best for the majority, because unfortunately there's been some terrible human atrocities that have existed in the name of the majority good. Well, we don't like this little group, so we'll eliminate them, this minority group. Rather, the Catholic understanding of common good is in connection with human dignity. That it's the good for all and for each and every. What is the greatest good for all and each and every? And with that, we have rights and responsibilities. There are basic human rights that we all have, but also a responsibility to contribute to society, especially to uphold and protect those human rights. And, of course, to have a special eye for the most poor and vulnerable in society. As Jesus says in that famous parable of the sheep and the goat in Matthew 25, where he uses this image of the king returning in the parable, this king coming to judge the sheep and the goats. Of course, he says, when I was hungry, you gave me food. When I was thirsty, you gave me drink. When I was naked, you clothed me. When I was imprisoned or sick, you visited me. Lord, when did we do all of these things? Whatever you did to the least, you did unto me. We're to have this particular eye for the poorest of the poor, for the least among us. This preferential option for the poor, the church calls it. That those who tend to be most overlooked, we have to look for more intentionally. And so, bringing this down into practical works, the church has articulated for us these lists of the 7 works of mercy. 7 corporal works of mercy, tending to the physical needs of people, which come from that very parable in Matthew 25. Clothe the naked, give food to the hungry, drink to the thirsty, visit the sick and the imprisoned, bury the dead. But also the 7 spiritual works of mercy, to counsel the doubtful, to instruct the ignorant, to comfort the afflicted, to admonish the sinner, to forgive, to bear wrongs patiently, and to pray. And so if you need a place to start, how do I practically live this out if Christ is my King? I'd encourage you to look up those 2 lists of the 7 works of mercy, 7 corporal works of mercy, and 7 spiritual works of mercy, and pray and reflect with each of them. What might Christ the King be calling me to live more intentionally, more fully out in the world, to more intentionally live these works of mercy, because they give a great practical starting point. And so, we're invited on this day to reflect on this kingship of Christ, that we belong to a kingdom not of this world. And if Christ is really king of my life, what does that mean for me? Because it changes everything. Not just my personal individual life, not just myself being transformed by Christ himself. This Christ, by the way, this king who doesn't want us merely to be slaves and servants, but loves us enough that he elevates us to be his friends and sons and daughters, who infuses his very life into us, who wants us to be sharers with him in glory, that he elevates us. This isn't a kingdom of darkness, of slavery, but a kingdom of life, that he draws us up to share with him, so that I'm transformed not only by his divine life and grace, by his teachings, but that also I'm called to be light to the world and salt to the earth, to with him transform the world, that we may proclaim Jesus Christ is King with our words, with our actions, and with our lives, not just within these walls here, but out there in the world, in the community, to others. That we may proclaim the Evangelion, the good news that Christ is King. The final word I'll say is this: that word Evangelion, where we get the word evangelize, to proclaim the good news, came from when, in ancient times, when a king would go to battle and conquer an opposing king, and would enter into the town and said, now, your previous king has been deposed. I now proclaim to you the Evangelion, the good news, good tidings of great joy that you have a new king. And the early Christians saw this and picked up on this language in the truest and deepest way. That the evil tyrant king of this world is being cast down, and the true king has come to save us. In Catholic baptism, immediately in the ritual, right after we're baptized with water, we're